Yeah, it was a great way to see the country. And I feel like everyone was so hopeful and positive, very
Yes,
hopeful and
yes.
positive, and
Mm,
nice way to meet people.
yeah, yeah. Hopeful. That's a good word to use. Yeah.
It's like, what do I want to do for the last third of my life?
Hmm.
And how do I want to set this up? And, what are my intentions? And I wanted to do it before we got to, before we couldn't do it anymore either, but I think it would be harder to do in our 80s, let's put it that way. Mostly it was once we got towards the end of the Jura, you finally can look across at the Alps.
Yeah.
And the Alps are just so amazing. Again, this was later in June, but there's still so much snow in the Alps at that time of year. And so they're awe-inspiring. And what's amazing is here, the Alps are 5 weeks of walking, and every day is spectacular. And it just keeps, we just couldn't believe that it can still be spectacular day after day after day.
That's
It's
incredible,
just
isn't it?
amazing. Yeah.
Welcome to the Winging It Travel podcast with me, James Hammond. Every Monday, I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Right now, I'm taking the podcast on the road travelling with me. So tune in every week for short form episodes detailing all my travels alongside my Monday guest episode. Are you a backpacker, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you, designed to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show.
Hello, people. Welcome to this week's episode. Quick update from me. So I'm actually planning to go back to UK for Christmas. So we're now in the works of working out when that's going to be and what we're going to do when we get there, and then come back to Vancouver in the new year. In terms of the podcast, I'm hoping to get some collaborations done in Europe, hopefully in UK, and maybe a cheeky one in France. We'll see what happens with that. And on today's episode, Kathy wrote a book about walking 1,400 miles from Northern Europe to Southern Europe. It's a fantastic episode, lots of information in this one. A great book too. I'll put that in the show notes. Make sure you buy that book. I highly recommend it. So let's get stuck in to the episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I'm joined by Kathy Elkind. Kathy is an author and writer and has released a book, To Walk Is to See It. This was a recommendation from a previous guest, Terry Repack. I'm going to discuss that book and some travel stuff today. They embarked on a massive walking journey, walking the GR5. We'll come to that if you don't know what that is later, which is roughly in Holland, and it walks all the way down to Nice in France. About 1,400 miles if you're from UK and USA. And if you're elsewhere, that's probably about 2,500 kilometers, something like that. An epic journey, lots of questions. Kathy, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. Just before we get stuck into some early travels, where are you right now in the world?
I live in Vermont, in the United States, so up north, and we're in stick season right now. All the leaves have fallen off the trees, but the snow hasn't quite happened yet.
It's a dreamy part of the US, isn't it? That northeast corner, I think.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I can look out from my office window and see mountains. And I was out hiking this morning. It's very nice.
Ah, dreamy. We drove the Kankanagas Highway probably about 6 weeks ago now. Maybe 8 weeks actually, and it's just the full colours weren't quite there. You can see it's just about to change, but we got there a little bit too early. But I can imagine that road, those rolling green hills. You see this on Instagram and Facebook, right? The rolling
Yeah,
hills
it's
that you drive
beautiful.
through.
Yeah,
It just looks
yeah,
insane. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And we're going to talk about your epic journey walking the GR5. First of all, we're going to delve into a little bit of history for travel. Where did you grow up? And also, was there any trips that you took when you were younger, which maybe kind of got the travel thing going inside you?
I grew up outside of Boston in Dedham, Massachusetts, and my family loved to camp and hike and that kind of thing. So, living I consider New England, all of New England, we're lucky living outside of Boston that it's not too far to get to the mountains
Mm.
and the coast of Maine. We camped there too. So my father was an amateur ornithologist, so we always used to say the trips were for the birds. And so we did a lot of camping and local travel in the Northeast. I think my first European trip was in college with two friends, and we just did the sort of the traditional tour, 2 days in pretty much every city. But I loved it. Just getting to see other cities and the beauty of churches and cathedrals and the way the streets are laid out. And I'm an early morning riser, so I do remember getting up early in the morning and either running or just walking through the city early in the morning is a great way to see a city.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I've got a couple of questions as it's on my mind. Early morning riser. So my partner is an early morning riser. I'm not. Is your partner Jim? Is he an early morning riser?
Not quite as much as I am. So yeah.
I do wonder with that dynamic of how that works, if you do need to be both the same, whatever one you are, or if you're opposite, can that work? It's an intriguing one, especially with travel and like getting out there early and at sunrises, for example. And yeah, it's an interesting debate, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It really is. Yeah, I'm a little bit faster packing up, and he was a little bit slower packing up. But we're both a get up and go people. We're not slow about getting up and going.
Okay, I think
that works.
My only saving grace with that is that maybe not get up as early, but I can get up and go. I think that's which probably makes me get away a little bit more. But
yeah.
And
also,
it
is important.
It is important. I like sometimes it's weird, wasn't it? Like I'm not an early morning riser, but when you're out there early and you get yourself out there, it is magical. Mm-hmm. I do actually think that the start of the day is better than the end. I guess people might prefer sunsets or sunrises, but there's a bit of hope at the start of the day and it's coming up and it's a new day and all that sort of stuff, right? It is really nice to get out there early and just kind of be there before anyone else. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But your body clock or your body type tells you otherwise, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, with European travel, underrated. I think I know we talk about this a lot on my podcasts, the Interrail or the Eurorail. If you're not from Europe, I think North Americans find this intriguing that you can just literally go from country to country in 2 or 3 hours, and it's different language, different culture. It's like traveling in the States, but you are in a different country. Each state is a different country, right? It's a pretty amazing way to travel. I think Europeans don't appreciate it that much.
Yeah.
But when I hear like guys like you who say, yeah, we go there, we go to the city and it's amazing. I'm like, oh, I should have done more when I was younger.
Right. Yeah.
But any favorites in Europe that you maybe can remember that was like, this city or this place is pretty good?
A couple of, after graduate school, Jim and I, before we were married, we went to Greece, Yugoslavia when it was still Yugoslavia. And that was really interesting, very, very interesting. So, and also that was the first time he and I had traveled in a foreign country together. So that was interesting too.
I think you learned a lot, right?
Yeah. And now we've traveled a lot together, but I feel like Yugoslavia was just a really interesting country just before it, basically fell apart. Just seeing what, the bus systems and things along the coast, and then going inland and how much the bus systems were sort of more broken down and people were still using scythes and horses and not tractors anymore. Just the difference was amazing.
I think some parts are still quite rustic.
Yeah.
Not as like, what we're talking like 30 years on ish.
Yeah.
It was just quite crazy. And I do think people, if you want to see like almost Europe 30 years ago, being nice, I'm not like trying to say they're backwards or anything, but you should go to a place like Montenegro or Albania. They really are quite rustic still. And I think they want to be a tourist destination, people, but they just haven't quite got it going yet. So I think now is a good time to go and check those countries out.
Yeah.
And also I was going to say that USA, classic, when people tell me their travels, they all go camping or road trips. It's a country built for roads, right? So
yes. Yeah.
We learned on our road trip this year that everyone's out there with their RVs or their camper vans and they're going out to different parts of the country. That some people travel miles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Epic miles. In UK, when you travel, it's it's a 2-hour drive, it's quite long. But these guys, we met someone I think they're from Alaska in our campsite. I mean, if you're driving from Alaska, you've got to go through Canada.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's a long way.
it's a heck of a way to go for a vacation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
an amazing country to see by car. I would recommend it. Okay, and before we get to the book, I know we touched on maybe a few countries in Europe, but worldwide, traveling, you obviously have traveled extensively a little bit. So is there any countries that you think, I hate using the term favorite, it's not a favorite term of mine, but maybe some countries that maybe resonated with you quite a lot? Is there any places that you thought, yeah, I just love the people, I love the culture, the vibe, and it really got you going travel wise?
Um, let's see. Jim and I went to Vietnam and did a bike tour, and I found it interesting that having a communist country, but not, and maybe not a hardcore, well, a communist country, but also some free economy, and also a Buddhist country. So it was fascinating, and then obviously the history with the U.S. and France and China. I mean, it's they've been influenced by many different countries, and the people were lovely and wonderful, and it's a beautiful country. So that was the first time for me to be in Asia. So I haven't traveled that much all over the world, but that was my first Asian country, and it's the only one right now. So I found it very interesting, and it just opens your eyes up to so much.
Yeah, Vietnam's a great place to start for anyone who wants to go to Asia. You're right about it's a weird dynamic because I've been there twice, so I think I get the same feeling both times. Like half the population is young. They're like under 30, half the population, maybe even 25. Yes. So it's a younger population, and they all speak English pretty much. To varying degrees level, but they all speak English, no French. Well, I guess they can speak some French. But the feeling there is that it is a communist country, but it's not that hardcore. I honestly, if you're traveling there and you're going day to day and you're doing things, I wouldn't even know. Like you just wouldn't hear about it. I just don't think you know much. But maybe the younger generation is just not interested that much in that side of things. They just kind of carry on and trying to push forward. But the younger generation, they love English speaking people. Like people might be surprised to hear that they love Americans. And I think if you think 50 years ago, that's a crazy thing to see, but it's just that people move on, generations move on, right? So but as a country, you biked it, right? Best way to see it. I think if you can get a bike, like a motorbike, or even a push bike, if you're hardcore, I think that's a cool way to see the country.
Yeah. It was a great way to see the country, and I feel like everyone was so hopeful and positive, very hopeful and positive, and that it was a nice way to meet people.
Yeah, hopeful. That's a good word to use. Yeah, I think you're right. A sense of just a good vibe. I think like there's no, hopeful. I can't think of a better word. That is the best word to use. Yeah, the younger generation. And if you're a younger backpacker and you go to these hostels, they're normally worked or run by younger Vietnamese people. They're so friendly to help you out, and they all speak the language because Vietnamese is quite hard to speak. So a great country. Okay, so we're going to delve into To Walk Is to See It. This is your book, and this is about an epic journey of walking, as I said in the intro, 1,400 miles, basically Northern Europe to the Southern Europe, right through the middle. First of all, can you just explain to the listeners maybe what is the GR5 and why did you choose that route?
So the GR5 stands for Grande Randonnée 5, the grand route or Grande Randonnée, the fifth one. There's many in Europe. So Jim and I had been living in Massachusetts. That's where we raised our kids. This was 2018. We were in our late 50s, and we had always wanted to do sort of an epic journey. I had always wanted to do the Appalachian Trail or the PCT, but it never quite worked out in our lives. So we decided this was the perfect time to take an adult gap year. And when we moved up, before we're diving into the next community, we just, we researched what we wanted to do. And Jim is hardcore. He can bike up anything, run up anything. And I'm not so much that way anymore. And I didn't really want to carry a heavy pack anymore. I didn't want to lug a tent around. And I love to camp for a couple of nights, but I don't want to camp night after night. And we both love culture. We both love cities. We also we love delicious, good food. So we asked everybody we knew, what's your best adventure you've ever been in? And we ended up running into a Frenchman who had traveled the world for business and for pleasure. And he said, the Grande Randonnée 5. And he was talking about walking across the Alps, which we ended up doing, but that's the 5 weeks that's the end of the GR5. But when I went and Googled GR5, it says it starts in Hoek van Holland in the Netherlands. So I'm like, wow, this is a long walk. And I started reading lots of blogs and books. And I personally I didn't quite realize how much I liked to research things until we started researching it. And I really enjoyed reading all the blogs and books. And I ran into a blog of a couple that live in France, but they're Americans, and they were in their early 60s when they walked the whole GR5. And I'm like, well, if they can do it, we can do it. So that's how we found the GR5.
That's amazing. There are two things there, like the adult gap year. How would you define that? Because the gap year is assumed by a lot of people to be younger people, right? Before university is a classic one.
Yes.
Even after university, before a job. I've done it as well. But adult gap year is an interesting one. Yeah. Is that like, are you still working at this point and you're just taking the year off? Are you self-employed? Are you retired? So is it like more just going out of your home for a year and coming back? Like, how would you define it?
I think it can be all of the above, everything that you just said.
Yeah.
I don't think there's, and a year, really, we were only gone ended up going for 5 months, but I also include all the time it took to do the research as part of the gap, as part of the gap year. So I would say it's, all of the above. I had a small business in Massachusetts, and when I came back after our long walk, I had a really hard time getting back into it. And that's why I ended up writing the book. And so now I'm doing, I wrote the book, I published the book, and I've been doing book tours. And so, I'm not making a lot of money, but I'm still working at least 30 hours a week. So,
tell me about it. Yeah. This podcast is the same.
Yeah. So it all depends on how you define it. And I think anybody can define it anyway. Yeah. The one thing I will say is I do think a gap year is a time to pause, and it's sort of a quest where whatever you do for your gap year, it's a little bit of a quest of, like, for me, it's like, what do I want to do for the last third of my life? Mm-hmm. And how do I want to set this up? And, what are my intentions? So, and I wanted to do it before we got to, before we couldn't do it anymore either. Our bodies aren't going to, I think it would be harder to do in our 80s. Let's put it that way. Who knows? Maybe hopefully we'll still be walking long distance in our 80s, but
some people do.
Yeah, some people do. Exactly. So
yeah.
I don't want to.
That's an interesting thought, because that's so resonant to the podcast, what I try to do, because so many people, even my age, go, I'll just go and do the travel when I'm retired. I'm like, you can't take that risk. Just the basic being that, you get older and you get tireder. And I think doing a gap year, like country to country every week, is going to be nigh on impossible. But also, how do you know you're going to make it that far? Like, I wouldn't take that risk if I was them. So, yeah, the message is, if you can, there's obviously a lot of privilege in there, economic privilege, all that sort of stuff. And if you can do it, I think you should probably think about it if people are listening. But yeah, that's a good point, that when you get to those later years, I don't think you really want to be out and about too much. You do a little bit. If you're in the 80s, you probably go to a few countries, but you'd rather sit back and then record all the adventures, right? And tell some stories to your kids or grandkids or your friendship group, whatever, right? I think that'd be pretty cool at that point. If you're getting to 80 and you've got nothing to say, it's a bit of a sad state of affairs.
Yeah.
Also, researching guilty pastime pleasure. I can spend an hour on Skyscanner country. Okay, well, where can we go? Where do we stay? Even though I'm probably not going to go there right now, but it's an addictive little Yeah, it's not too bad. There's worse addictions, but like you can sit
Yes.
there for an hour and get really into it, can't
Yes.
you? Okay, we're going to delve into the book. I've kind of devised the notes here for listeners. Of course, like the last one done with Terry, I've got each part. I think there's 7 or 8 parts in this book, but I'm not going to delve too much into it because people need to buy the book to read more into it. But I've got some subjects here, probably from each chapter, that I think are quite important just to get a feel of what you're thinking at the time in these countries. So you, obviously, as you mentioned, you begin in Holland, Belgium, and your first week was actually biking, which is quite an interesting start. What was the
Yeah.
thinking there? And I got the impression from your the chapter here that it's actually quite tough.
Yeah. Well, as I was researching and planning, I kept reading about, they were talking about getting blisters walking on the bike paths and how flat it was. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, Jim is he's gonna mutiny because it's gonna be too flat and boring for him. He likes going up and down. So I kind of suggested, why don't we bike the first week, which would have been 3 weeks of walking. So I suggested we bike, and he loved that idea because he loves bikes. So he looked into all the research of renting bikes, and we did rent bikes, and we biked the first week. But I actually had picked up something. I had picked up some germs on the airplane, and I think part of the way I know this now about myself, but basically I get so excited about traveling and adventure that I keep going when really my body is saying stop. And I got quite sick as the biking went along. And instead of just stopping and going to the doctors, I'm like, okay, well, I'll just bike to the train station because there were trains and I could take a train to the next place and I would rest. So I learned through that whole process that basically I really need to listen to my body and say, let's take 2 days off and I need to go to the doctors, and which I eventually did, but it took a little while. So I definitely learned from that experience right off the bat to listen to my body. But there's also, the good part of that is that I can know that I can push through and make it through if I need to. So what I was worried about is, when you're on an adventure, you kind of have to step into that sort of, I call it a tough girl skin or a tough woman skin. And I need to just keep going and power through when really I need to stop and rest. So it's a balance of listening to, who to listen to.
Yeah, I think you're quite stubborn.
Yeah.
Not to go to the doctor from what I was reading, so people can read that for a laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate because the problem we have when we travel, and there's like almost 2 parts really. If you're doing like vacation travel, so you get, I don't know, 2 weeks a year, 3 weeks a year, whatever it is in USA, in Canada, UK, whatever, you haven't got time to stop. If you really want to see someone for 2 weeks, you've got to get going. So it's like quick, and your body probably thinks, crikey, like, can we do this? But probably doesn't have time to think of like, oh, I need to be ill. Because some people get ill on holiday because they just like leave normal life, they rest, and there's like, oh, all these things come out, and almost a bit like what you're experiencing. But it's tough because if you've got a short amount of time to travel, what do you do? I don't know what choice there is. I mean, it's a pretty sad trip if you go for 2 weeks to Vietnam and you're going to bike it, but like 10 days is just feeling ill. I mean, it's a pretty sad trip. And then the second part I was going to say is that if you're longer travel, this is why, if it's possible, I propose this idea, because if you are ill, like you were, you can just chill out for a few days, get better, then go again. That's the beauty of doing a bit of a longer travel. But was it ever in your mind that, like, just to think, we're on this massive trip, I don't know if you had a time constraint for your walking trip, if you had a date to finish, but did you ever think, well, we've got 3 months, whatever it is, like, let's just take 2 days out, it's not a problem? Or were you always thinking, we need to go?
I think because it was so early in the trip, I didn't really know we hadn't even started walking yet, so I didn't really know our walking pace. There were so many unknowns, which probably, when there's a lot of unknowns, I definitely sort of get a little more anxious. And so I think that's why I wanted to keep pushing through. And I did stop, I did take those I did try to rest for a
Mm.
couple of days and it just didn't work. I kept getting sicker and things like that. So I definitely know now when I'm sick to stop and go to the doctor
Go to the doctor,
and
yeah.
and just get it over with, and rest. And it is okay. It is okay to rest. I think now that we've done this and we've done some other longer walks, I have learned to just relax into it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lesson I thought I got from that is that you could obviously read about your slight anxiety about going to a doctor in a foreign country, which is what anyone would think, especially if you don't speak the language. I think I've done it maybe once or twice, and you just have to try your best and just hope that they understand what you're trying to say. But that can be daunting, can't it? Because it's an experience that it's going to be ultimately okay. I think they'll get it in the end, but it can be quite nerve-wracking going to the doctor and trying to explain in another language what's wrong.
Yeah, I definitely used Google Translate, and I had a whole list of my symptoms and why we were there, and they read it and they were wonderful doctors, and I felt very taken care of, and it was only 24 euro,
Oh yeah. It's cheap in Europe, yeah.
So it all worked out. It all worked out fine.
Yeah. Okay. And what's interesting about this chapter is you talk about your backpack. Now, people listening right now is like, oh, if I want to do a 3-month walking trip, how do you devise your backpack? Because it can't be too heavy because you've got to walk a lot, but it also can't be too light because you need to carry enough stuff. So what was your approach to this for your trip?
I definitely, again, reading a lot in the beginning and of what we needed and what we didn't need. Luckily, I don't think I'm that high maintenance. So it's definitely cutting out. And we had our backpacks and we had actually had sort of side pockets I had a 30-liter backpack, a 36-liter backpack, and Jim had 45. And we had these side pockets, but eventually I got rid of enough stuff so I didn't even have the side pockets. And it's a learning curve. When we came back, 3 years later, we went on another walk, and I sort of actually cut out too much. I didn't bring an extra pair of glasses, and they broke, and that was a mistake. So, you learn.
Yeah, of course.
And in Europe, there are many places that you can, you're walking by drugstores, almost every day in the villages, or, the pharmacy. So there's always stuff to buy, but glasses are important to get your exact prescription. You'd have to stay around. So you learn what needs to go. But the lighter, the better, and simplicity, just, putting on the same pair of walking clothes every single day is, having one other set, but yeah.
But you were pretty flexible. I got from this chapter that you were willing to throw some stuff out if you don't need it. That's a good attitude to have.
Yeah.
I guess maybe like for people thinking, oh, maybe the first week or two might be quite a bit heavier, but if you're willing to throw some stuff out, that's okay, right? You can just work as you go.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, and for this chapter, in these chapters, there's some characters come into the book, which I like. I like characters. I think Phillips, who didn't speak that great English, but he showed you where to go for the walking route to begin. And I quite like that because he obviously hosted you guys, but it's interestingly analyze the dynamic that he can't speak great English, but he's still willing to help you out, show you where to go. It's just a different thinking, isn't it? Because when you get to like Canada or USA, like most people just can't speak any other language. So like it's amazing these people can speak a little bit of another language and help you out. I quite like it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my biggest regret, and I think Jim's too, is that for me, languages are very difficult, and so I could speak very little bit of French to get by.
Yeah.
And Jim got better and better at it, but we couldn't have deep conversations, so we had to rely on, the locals being able to speak a little bit of English, and other people willing to translate and things like that. But you also learn, you use Google Translate, you use your hands. And it's amazing what you can communicate with, just trying and not feeling silly and things like that. So, and sometimes I have a feeling they were talking about something and we were talking about something else and we weren't even on the same wavelength, but yeah, but he definitely had looked up how to say some words because he really wanted to show us this alley, this alley, which was a beautiful line of trees that all grew together sort of in a tunnel. It was really,
that sounded really nice. Yeah. You described that really well, that chapter. And also, my experience with this is me and my friend done part of the Camino last year, and we both made an effort to speak some Spanish. But we both have one slightly different trait. I would say my friend can speak better Spanish, but I'm a bit more brave. So whereas like if we're approaching a situation and it's like you've got to go and ask someone or speak to someone, I think he could speak it better, but I think I can probably approach him a bit better. So like we had this dynamic where I approach him, I'll give it a go, probably get it wrong. And he's like, I think you're saying this. And like, okay. And we'll just like work together.
Yeah.
It definitely helps though, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yeah, exactly. And I think over the traveling, I've gotten better of being, more confident in just trying, even with hand language, just sign language and hand language, just going for it. You can't, they can just look at you with a quizzical face and that's, you tried.
I tried that in Middle East this year. I know about 6-7 words in Arabic, and you wouldn't believe how much difference that makes. Turkey was saying I learned some Turkish, like 5 or 6 words. There's a bit of fear in there because when you start a conversation, they think you can speak it, but you can't. You just know 5 or 6 words. But I think just ignore that. Go with a hello, how are you? And I think that gets you in. And I think from there you can work it out. I think it's very important for any trip anywhere.
Totally, yeah.
And just to finish on this chapter, I guess Holland and Belgium's flat. You mentioned some blisters as well that you were getting, but I guess that's just like you getting used to walking. I think that happens to most people once they get in the first, week or 2. I think they just work out the body. But yeah, topography was quite flat. Maybe was it in like a nice gentle start, do you think?
Yes, it's very flat in the Netherlands and the beginning of Belgium. Then it was the Ardennes, rolling hills through Spa, Belgium. And yeah, it was definitely rolling hills, but no big mountains. And again, the trail is very well marked, and nicely graded. You're not stepping rock to rock or anything like that. It was
so it's easy to follow the trail and know where you're going.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's great. I think that goes into the next chapter, Luxembourg. You walk into Luxembourg where it slightly changes, right? The waymarks, they kind of they change.
Yeah, the waymark change. They changed to a circle, yellow circle on green. Yeah, Luxembourg just does things in their own way, but it was still well marked. It was very well marked.
Yeah, Luxembourg is an interesting country. We went there this year, and pristine, clean, organized. I think some of the words I would describe. Maybe people a bit cold.
Yep.
Just getting on with the stuff. Is that how you describe maybe your experience?
Yeah, and almost empty. I don't know. We walked through again. We were not in. I kind of wish we had gotten to Luxembourg City, but we didn't get there.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have liked to have gone there. We were in walking through small villages, and many of them seemed quite empty to us. And it was hard to know whether some of the houses were second homes outside of the city that, we were walking through on a Tuesday morning and, the towns were empty. So,
because you went through, did you go through Weiden Castle?
Weiden,
we went there from Luxembourg City, free transport in Luxembourg mostly, so you can get a train from Luxembourg City to Weiden, and a bus. I think you have to get a bus as well. But yeah, it's an interesting place. You mentioned in the chapter about I think you went for dinner like a Portuguese restaurant, and there's actually a lot of Portuguese in Luxembourg. Is one of the things I didn't realize.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either, but we found that out. Yeah.
A weird quirk. Interesting in this chapter, you mentioned you try to listen to podcasts when you walk, and I was like, that's an interesting way to go because I don't think I could do it unless I'm really unless it's uphill and you need some motivation, you get some music or something or some words to listen to. But yeah, I kind of felt like you tried that and it just didn't really work because you want to absorb the area around you.
Yeah, I was listening to actually a book on tape, not a podcast, and it was a book on tape about Naples.
Naples, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and as I'm walking through a beach forest and the birds are singing it, it just didn't seem right. So I tried for about 10 minutes and it just didn't work. So I ended up not listening to books on tape at all while I was walking. And I was just there, and I'm really glad. I can listen, at night when I'm going to bed, I listen to books but when I'm traveling, but I just did not like it while I was walking. And I don't like listening to music while I walk either.
Yeah, on a walking trip like this, I wouldn't do it. I need to know and absorb the area around me, I think. What was interesting, though, is that you and Jim would be having days off because you need days off to rest, but you go your separate ways. And what was interesting is you go your separate ways, which I think is needed because I think it's an intense trip. You just need your own time. But also, you mentioned that you're quiet walkers. I think Jim is very quiet, right, when he walks or hikes, and I'm the same. I won't be indulging in a conversation unless it's a really easy flat trail, and that's okay. But any work needed, I'm a bit quiet as well when I walk. So that's quite an interesting few snippets there. But the days off and the separate stuff is interesting as well.
Yeah, well, when you're together 24/7, basically, on this whole trip, you need to have, we found that we needed times to just go off and do our own thing. And when we're on the walk together, you kind of have to stay to, you don't have to walk right next to each other. So days off, we didn't always go our separate ways, but it was a good time to just, I usually wanted to rest more than he did. So he'd want to go do some more stuff, more sightseeing, things like that.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like you did a whole walk and then more sightseeing. I think I'd be like you. I just need to rest. I'm not a good hiker, so I will need my rest. We in this chapter learn about also very interesting to your personal life is your dyslexia, which is a interesting topic of conversation because when I was going to school, this is not that long ago, but like 30 years ago, whatever. It was a thing, but maybe not respected about kids having it. I think you described that in your book, but obviously going to school much earlier about how you're seen as this like weird person essentially who just couldn't read or write, almost dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a crazy thought because I had a friend in school and he's a doctor now and he's dyslexic, so he'd get given extra time for exams, but he's a doctor, researcher, PhD. So it's a weird thing that people used to think that I couldn't get my head around it. Yeah,
well, basically dyslexic brains are just very different. And many dyslexics do become doctors because they are very they can see in 3 dimensions. And I know, surgery and being able to do surgery is sort of a superpower. And it's taken me, a lifetime to find my superpowers, but I have found them, and there's pluses and minuses. Dyslexia is it's very difficult for people learning to read, but there are some ways that you have superpowers, and finding them helps you feel better about yourself. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, because some of the stuff you're describing, it's just quite sad to read, isn't it? About how you were treated in school, and it's just awful, really, isn't it? But you can't change it, and it made you who you are now. But it's just a lesson learned for maybe nowadays that dyslexia is probably more accepted now, I think. But I guess it's another thing that's now come along that we don't accept as much. So it's a rolling process.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then in this chapter, you also talked about family-run hotels. This is quite an interesting dynamic because you're starting to run into places to stay on the trail where it's not a commercial place. It's like literally someone's home or someone's barn at the back garden, whatever. So that's a different dynamic, right? Because I guess they might be working and you've got to wait until they finish work to open up for you to stay. This is a patron shout out to Laura from the Swamp Soup Stickers, who has contributed £5 to the podcast on my Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it, and it helps the podcast to keep going in the future. If you're interested, head to the show notes where you'll find a link to my Patreon. The website address is patreon.com/Winging It Travel Podcast. For £5 English, you will receive some trendy stickers from myself in the post, a shout out on each episode, and also my digital travel planner by email. Thank you for your support.
yeah, the Gîtes, and different places. Yeah, they basically turn sometimes barns or part of a house into, bunk rooms or small rooms, and then serve family style dinners and breakfasts. And yeah, it's a great way to meet other walkers and a great way to meet the locals and chat and things like that. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. The small hotels are really fun too. And at least in the US, we're so used to, Motel 6, everything is I don't know, what do you call that when it's
like a chain?
Yeah, a chain, exactly. And they're all the same. And Europe, it's just not that way. And it's just such a nice way to travel because they're all so different. And people make the homemade jams out for breakfast, 6 different homemade jams. And
Dreamy.
It's just love. It's just very special.
Yeah. And then you described Luxembourg as quite idyllic, actually, like some vineyards and stuff like that. And I'll get the sense that at the end of the chapter in Luxembourg, you're getting quite stronger now. Like with walking, you're in a groove and you're starting to work out what your days are. You're smashing in 20+ kilometer days as well. So at this point, you really got your groove.
Yeah, it took a while, but yes. Yeah. And again, since we had never really done it, I kind of realized that there's different steps to getting in shape. It's one thing to be able to walk all day, but it's another thing to be able to walk day after day, all day long.
Yeah.
It's a mindset and a physical level to get to. And then eventually we are going through mountains. So you have to be able to add elevation into that equation and get strong enough for that. So it's step. And that's the wonderful thing about the GR5 is that it does start out flat and then rolling hills and then smaller mountains and finally the Alps at the very end. So
yeah, how did you find, just go before we go into France, the next chapter, how did you find Luxembourg as a sort of part of the trip?
Luxembourg, actually, if somebody just wants to do a 10-day, it was about 10 days of walking, is a wonderful, if you just want to do part of it and see how you like long distance walking. I think it has a nice, it's definitely up and down in parts of it, especially there's something called the Petite Switzerland, which was through some sort of caverns and stuff. And it was beautiful. And there's the different castles to visit and things like that. So there was, interesting culture and the wines. As we talked about earlier, the people weren't quite, it was hard to get to know the people, I would say. But other than that, Luxembourg is beautiful.
Yeah, very beautiful. And I think you also mentioned this chapter as well. I didn't touch on it, but you start to mix up, maybe getting a bus here and there or a train here and there. In Luxembourg, a lot of the transport is free. So if you want to do a bit of a walk and then get a bus or a train to somewhere, you can, and there's no extra cost. So people can mix that up and see how they go for 2 or 3 days. Because like you say, walking one day is one thing. I think you mentioned this late in the book. I think I'm going to come to it. And then walking day after day is another step. And I think it takes a while to get into that. You could probably mix it up in Luxembourg quite nicely.
Yes, yeah.
And then sort of the rest of the book is in France, pretty much. I think you dip into Switzerland as well, but we're now into part 3, which is Lorraine. How did you find the contrast between, you do describe this in the chapter, from Switzerland to France? People might think, Luxembourg to France, people might think it's the same, but actually it's going to be different. I think the people will change. It's probably not going to be as refined or as looked after. Maybe is this what you described, do you think, in the book?
Yes, definitely. Within the first 10 minutes of we come across a walker who starts chatting with us and asking us where we've walked, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story because you need to read it. Need to read it, but it's a great. He just loved walking, and it just made my heart sing to chat with him about walking. And you just realize how much the French love to walking and believe in their right to walk. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. And let's see, also, yeah, it's just not quite Luxembourg again, sort of everything is in its place. And France is, at least the Lorraine, that part of France was a little bit, just not quite as well kept, but still, still wonderful. And then, well, the pastries were good everywhere, but they are even a little bit even better in France. So
it's a running theme in the book, the pastries, and the local fruit as well.
Yes, yeah, yes, yeah.
Just reading it makes you think, I just want to be there, eating that and looking at the view. Just get me there.
Yeah.
You do put in a real big day in this book, in this chapter. You've done 37 kilometers in a day. That's crazy. I think that's going to Metz.
Yeah. So as we were, planning it out, we thought, well, do we do 2 short days, or do we just jump right to Metz? And we decided to push ourselves and, see if we could do it. And it was a long day, but we made it. And then we took a day off in Metz, which is a beautiful city, which I had heard of Metz, but I didn't know that much about. But
same, don't know much about it. Yeah,
it was a lovely, lovely visit. And the cathedral is absolutely spectacular. And
God, that sounded amazing at night.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. People have to read that to find out. But when you described that, I was like, whoa, I need to go. And some characters turn up in this book. I think Roland and Marie host you, and that's where you get to see the cathedral in its glory, really. But
they nicely invited us up for champagne and dessert, which at like 9:30 they invited us earlier, but they said come at 9:30. And usually we're in bed by 9:30, but we made an exception and we had a lovely time.
Yeah, I think the people aspect in this one, you mentioned that you meet a few more people in this chapter, but also a lesson that maybe is that if you feel like you want to invite someone to dinner or you want to hang out with someone, don't be afraid to ask. Because I think you said you missed out on a lady called Sabine. Yeah, but you didn't quite ask her to maybe come to dinner because you had a cabin to stay in, and you felt like you missed out a little bit. So the lesson was maybe be a bit more out there and ask any walkers or trail people that you see that if you feel like there's a connection there, hang out and don't be afraid to ask.
Don't be afraid to ask. Exactly. I definitely have learned that.
It's difficult though, isn't it? Because you don't know if they speak English.
Yeah, well, we had been chatting with her. We knew she spoke English, but and again, she was in her early 30s, and we were in our late 50s. Maybe she didn't even want to hang out with, but she could have just said no. But we have learned to just ask and keep chatting with people. And I also believe my daughter has gone off traveling. And I know she and a friend ran into an older couple who lived in New York City. They were in Peru, and this older couple took them to dinner, and they all had a wonderful time. And I sort of think it's, you help out, you connect with somebody else's kids, or young adults, and give a little, and it'll come back to you in different ways. So keep connecting with all the different generations too. I definitely learned that on this trip. It's I love being around, younger people and older people.
Yeah, we have done quite a bit of that. Like a lot of people on this podcast, actually, where people have met traveling. To give you an example, we touched on Vietnam earlier. We're getting a bus from one place to another. I can't quite remember where. Somewhere in the middle, maybe Hue, Da Nang, maybe.
Yeah.
And this tall, big Australian white guy was in the middle. And he's way too tall for the seat. This guy's like 6'5" or 6. He's called Michael, and I could see it's just a bit uncomfortable. And they're actually biking Vietnam and going around to Laos, so they're biking all Southeast Asia. But they wanted a day off just to get a bus from one place to another. So we just got chatting in a service station that the bus stopped for, I don't know, lunch, half an hour. An Australian couple, and then we kept in touch. And then along the way up Vietnam, we bumped into each other and went out for dinner. So these little things become really nice little anecdotes.
Yeah,
we stay in touch, and then later they come on my podcast, and we keep in touch loosely. They're in Australia now, quite far away, but it's key to get into those relationships and just ask a few questions. And now with social media and your phones, you can just get someone's contact details really quick.
Yeah.
That's a lesson on this chapter. And then you go into, I don't know if I can pronounce this right, the Vosges or the Vosges?
Vosges. I didn't pronounce it correctly either for quite a while. but it's the Vosges. Yeah. The Vosges was a small mountain range. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you describe to listeners where is that roughly, and what is there? Like, what's the topography like there?
So it's in the northeastern part of France, the Vosges, and it I think it's part of Alsace, or parts of Alsace are in the Vosges. So and castles, and parts of it are quite steep, but many of the mountains are flat topped. It was quite interesting. Balloon Alsace, it's steep climbing up, but then it's flat on the top. And there's also, cows grazing in the summer grazing up high, which was true in most of France, which is really fun. And the wildflowers were blooming. There was still a little bit of snow on the north facing slopes. And it was fun. Let's see, what time of year was that now? That's the beginning of June. We're in the Vosges. And this was I would say, the rainiest part of our whole trip, but we definitely had a few rainy days, and where we had to put our raincoats on, but we lucked out on the weather basically through the whole. That was the only time we basically had to put our raincoats on. So
okay, yes. A lot of things in this chapter actually that I would touch on, but people obviously got to read it. The balloon Alsace, there's a great story for that, so people need to delve into it. But that's a heartwarming moment when you climbed up there.
Yes.
We'll leave a cliffhanger there. And you did start to film. I didn't realize this until probably this chapter, that you had like a little YouTube channel, maybe, or you're filming on your phone. Did you release every week or 2 weeks?
My goal was to release every 2 weeks, one video every 2 weeks. So actually, I learned vlogging sort of by watching two of my daughter's friends do what's Raya and Louie, I don't know, they are pretty famous vloggers in the US, and I just watched them do it. And so I had a YouTube channel because I did mindful self-compassion with my work. So I just wanted to do some vlogging, and vlogging is also a great way to record the trip, even for yourself. So, for every video that you end up posting, many videos just don't ever get, a lot of it doesn't ever get seen. But again, it just helps you. It helped me for writing the book to, go back and look at those videos and stuff. So, and I would talk about, what was going on in my head as I walked.
Very honest.
Very honest. Everyone says my book is very honest and sort of raw. I don't know. I like to share.
I liked the fact in this bit that you think, I don't know if you said this in the chapter later on, but you were working on maybe finishing like a final product, getting all the videos together to create almost like a documentary of your trip. Really, that'd be quite cool. I assume you've not done that yet.
No, I still haven't done that. It's on my list, but that'd be awesome.
I'd love to watch that and just see how it relates to the book. That'd be quite interesting. I want to learn a little. I need to learn a little bit more of editing. I think my editing is very rough, I would say. Right.
And I just wonder whether, do you know is there sometimes it's shaky, my videos are shaky too, and I wonder if you can get them unshaky. I don't know.
Still the video. I reckon it's probably possible. I'm sort of basic to intermediate with video editing, so I do YouTube channel as well. This is one of the things I need to get better at. It's like next year's goal, really. But that's interesting. I'll have a little look, see what I can find for you. I use Final Cut Pro, which is on my Mac. It's a video editing software. But I'd imagine it's quite expensive, so I imagine you must be able to do something like that. I imagine like a top level videographer like, I can sort that out for you, but I just wouldn't know. But it's the recording of the trip, it's a great idea. Like even by audio, that's what I've done for my travels this year. That's why the podcast has still going. I'm still a bit behind on it. The little 10-minute episodes each week, because it's a great way for me to write down and sort of say what we've been doing and remember it. Because I'm not a great writer, so just a few notes do the podcast, it's there. I can go back to it and listen to it. So it's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
You mentioned in this one, the 4 stages of a super walker. What are those?
Now I got to remember what they are. I think it's basically being able to, one first is being able to walk every day, or not every day, being able to walk for a full day.
Full day, yeah.
Second one is being able to walk day after day.
Yeah. Then
I know one of them is elevation. What is my other? I have to go look back.
Well, I think would the third one be week to week? I think.
Oh yeah, maybe week 2. Yeah.
I think it's in like time stages. Yeah, I think you were saying that.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, that a full day walking is the first step, and then you got to do that 3 times or 2 times in a row, and then once you do that, it's week after week or even month after month, because then it really is like a prolonged process. I think the last one is literally you're running up hills and you're almost like, I think you come to the end of the book, you mentioned about you climbed up a hill and it was faster than you thought you were going to do it in. So that was the last stage, I think. But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I was like, oh, well, where am I? I think I'm day to day. I can do day to day, week to week. Not sure.
Yeah.
And in this chapter, this area is full of like ridges, refugees, churches, little villages with no one there. There's a real mix of topography in that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we'll go into the part 5, the Jura. You mentioned interestingly that you get like grand views of Switzerland and France, and people might think it's the same, but I guess, did it feel different when you started looking across like from these high end points of Switzerland and France? But I guess effectively a border is just a made up thing, but did you feel like you're going to a different country?
Mostly it was once we got towards the end of the Jura, you finally can look across at the Alps, and the Alps are just so amazing. And the white, again, this was later in June, but there's still so much snow in the Alps at that time of year. And so they're awe-inspiring. But there's not too, the Jura aren't quite as steep as the Vosges. So it's long expanses of beautiful farmland. And then there are some, rocky drop-offs. So, but there isn't too much difference between the French Jura and the Switzerland Jura. It's just the boundary line, really, basically.
Yeah, it's just a made-up boundary, right?
Exactly. And it was interesting, as a lot of the boundary lines moved throughout the years and centuries because of different wars and things like that.
Of course. Yeah. I liked in this chapter your a little bit about instinct, because there's a story I think in there about not getting a public transport like a boat, like 7 kilometers down the way. And there is an interesting debate when you're on this like trip, and I guess you would have met people on the trip. Some people are really strict, like they have to walk every inch of it, and if they miss a bit, they've got to go back and do it, or they just won't even cheat themselves out of like, I don't know, 2 hours of not walking. Like they really have to walk everything. And then there's the other side of like, well, if we get a bus or we get a boat, like, let's do it. But then you think that you're cheating almost, and it's like, oh, what do you do? And I was like reading this, like, oh, I think I've done this before. I done a little bit of hitchhiking on the Camino just for like 5 kilometers. And did I care at the time that I didn't walk the 5 kilometers? No. And then does anyone else care a year later? No. So I think at the time you got to trust your instinct. If you just need a break, I think there's no shame in that, right?
Exactly. And in the guidebook, it even says you can take the boat, and I don't know why I felt like I had to walk it. So, but I have definitely learned to just, and as we got into the Alps too, some of the people were taking a chairlift up or something like that. And
of course,
we didn't end up doing that, but I can see doing that maybe when we're, walking in our 70s. I'll take the chairlift up, and Jim will still walk it, but
yeah, of course, yeah.
But no, I think everybody needs to do the trip their own way, what feels right for them.
Yeah.
Hey, Just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5. Or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for travelling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you.
Okay. And 2 more lessons in this one. I won't delve too much into it because people got to read it. But the language barrier. We touched on it earlier. I really felt in this chapter that it really started to maybe grate on you a little bit that you couldn't join in because there's obviously a lot of French-speaking walkers. It is even travelling anywhere is kind of I don't know how you describe it. You feel like you should, but it's impossible to learn every language in the world if you're traveling in different countries. But if you're going to one country, I think you should probably try and learn at least something or try and understand what they're trying to say. Because you do miss out, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And again, we knew enough to order things and figure most things out. But to have a deeper conversation, there were definitely some other women who were my age walking, and they were having a nice, chat out on the porch. And I, really would have loved to hear what they were talking about, what their jobs were. And, I love people and I love stories. And so I was feeling a little sad and I guess lonely too, missing my friends and things like that. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe one of these days we'll have such great AI or computer things that whatever they say will get translated quickly.
Yeah,
I'd be able to understand it, and I could join a deeper conversation. That hasn't quite happened yet, but who knows?
And then it'll be one language for the whole world.
Well, yeah,
it's danger, right? Yeah, but then you do mention that there's a little community of you walking at this chapter. Like you start to bump into the same people. Obviously, you could communicate in English with them. And the first sense of like a real community of walkers, you meet them in different places along the trail, say goodbye, and a sense of like a common goal and belonging.
Yes, yeah. And again, this was also different age range. There was a young couple and an older couple, which was a lot of fun. And I'm still in contact with the younger couple. And they're actually not a couple anymore, but that's fine. They're still friends. And they actually both bought my book and took a picture of them with their with the book and sent it to me. So that's just really, really fun. And they were wonderful about translating when we were when there was longer stories and things like that. So the community of walkers, which I think is very similar on the Appalachian Trail. People talk about they sort of become a family on these long trails, and in the Camino, people get to know people really well. And we hadn't had that until we got to the Jura, and then actually some of these people didn't keep going on the to the Alps, but we did run into other people in the Alps.
And then bumping into people was good, but then you start to realize that booking accommodation is quite tough. I guess it makes sense if it's a popular walking route in the summer. These places do get booked out or booked quickly. Was that a stress on the walk, do you think?
Yes, it was. And actually it was a little bit more in the beginning because we got better and better at making reservations. And at first we only made 2 or 3 days out because we didn't need to make them more than that. And we also didn't know exactly our pace and everything like that. But you're right, as it got more into summer in the Alps, we definitely booked out 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And that sometimes took our whole day off. I mean, one day we were in the Vosges and we were just basically all day long working on getting reservations, which was kind of a pain. And now we've also learned to just trust it a little bit more, that you'll find a place, you'll find a place.
Key
and
lesson.
They're not going to kick you out, especially in the mountain refuges. You can sleep on the floor if you have to. They're not going to kick you out. So, again, we've learned a lot through the whole process. And at one point, actually, Sabine, she gave us the name of it's called Sleeping on the GR5, and it's all in Dutch, but we could figure out it was a giant spreadsheet of all the places to stay.
Oh,
And
wow.
we ended up using that quite a bit. So
God, that's a great
you
resource.
end up
Yeah.
finding out more and more places, and just keep asking people too.
Yeah, asking people. That's the key, right?
Yeah.
And then you started to sort of question after you finish, which is an interesting thought because you've still got the Alps to go yet in the book, but you maybe start to think after the walk, like you're starting to worry about maybe going back home to Vermont or your business that you mentioned earlier. So that's interesting that you're already thinking ahead.
Well, again, I sort of thought this walk or quest was going to, bring me clarity of what
Yeah.
my life purpose was going to be, but but I hadn't been thinking about the future, and it kind of worried me that I hadn't been thinking about it. But it all ended up, sometimes you just have to trust to. I mean, obviously, I was reflecting on life as we were walking, which I share in the book, but
Yeah.
I wasn't reflecting on the future all that much, which is all okay.
Yeah, of course,
we're all talk about let's stay in the present anyways right now.
Yeah, you're right to say that about the book. There's a mix of where you are and what you're getting up to and who you're meeting, but also reflection on your life up to that point. Very, you dip in and out. I quite like that. It's like you're in I don't know, accommodation somewhere, meeting some people, and the next time you explain about a previous experience where it might have affected that day or whatever. So yeah, I quite like that. You're going, I'll get to know you as well as what you're doing then. So it's like a mix. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next two chapters is the Alps, which maybe looking back, was it maybe a bit easy up to that point? Or not easy, but like it's okay to that point, right? But the Alps just seems to me daunting that you've got to that point. And yeah, there's ridges and there's ups and downs, but the Alps is a mountain range. I'm like, oh my God, you've got to go walk up them. Like, were you nervous about that, do you think?
Oh, I was definitely nervous about the Alps. I wasn't sure if I could do it, but then I did, once we got there and after the first day, I realized, I could do it. We had been walking for 2 months and it's not any steeper. Again, the wonderful thing about European trails, they don't go straight up. They zigzag back and forth, and they're very well taken care of. So we definitely were doing, I mean, some days we were climbing 4,000 feet every day and down 4,000 feet. So they were bigger days, but by that point I was in pretty good shape. So I could do it. And we didn't end up taking as many days off in the Alps too, because we were in pretty good shape. What we did do is towards the end, we definitely took a few long days and cut them in half and just did 2 shorter days instead of taking a day off, which was a lot of fun, because then you get to just
enjoy it, don't
take
you?
it, enjoy it and take it slowly.
Yeah, that's a temptation to keep going, right, all the time. Faster. Yeah. And in
Yeah.
these chapters, your friends come, Margot and Jim. There's a story in
Margot
there.
and Todd. Yep.
Sorry, Margot and Todd. Sorry.
Yep.
There's a story in there that these are good friends to have.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we'll leave it at that as people to understand why, to hear the story. But yeah, these guys, they were described as almost like super hikers, almost.
They are. They're triathletes.
Triathletes, yeah.
Triathletes, yeah. Hardcore.
Hardcore, yeah. And Col de Beast, I don't know how to pronounce that right, is like a place where you feel like you've entered the Alps. I guess the views would have been incredible up there.
Yeah. Well, and the wildflowers, the snow has just melted off a lot of these areas, so the wildflowers were just incredible. And you were so high, it was the tallest views that we've gotten so far. And you turn back and you can see Lake Geneva still way down, and then looking forward you see Alps after Alps after Alps. So
like snow-capped mountains and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But on my notes here, all these like places that and like stay in, like they just sound incredible.
But yeah, and what's amazing is here, the Alps are 5 weeks of walking, and every day is spectacular. And it just keeps, we just couldn't believe that it can still be spectacular day after day after day.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Amazing. Yeah.
You also had a interesting story in here. People obviously will read it, but it's about I don't know if I pronounced this town right, Chamonix,
Yeah.
where you had a decision to make because sometimes it can be dangerous on the terrain, right? There could be avalanches or rain, and it's like, I think it's an interesting lesson in this one about trusting your instinct about what you feel is the right way to go or the wrong way to go. And do you think that's like just quite an important thing to have in, especially in the mountain areas, because obviously things can change day to day, can't they?
Yeah, you have to pay attention to the weather. And I tend, this is sort of the angst between Jim and I. He wants to just keep going and going no matter what. And I tend to want to preserve life. I have that tendency to preserve life. It was quite snowy and the weather was not good. And I was like, we need to turn back. And he's like, no, let's keep going. And we do end up turning back because there was too much snow on these ladders and things like that. It was, and I'm glad, and he's glad we turned back too. But so
interesting topic, that isn't it? Risk versus non-risk with men and women that you mentioned in that chapter. It's an interesting way to analyze. I guess I was just thinking about me, like what am I? Definitely more risk than non-risk.
Yeah. And it's also time in the mountains too, knowing when to take the risks and when not to. But for me, when I'm in a new place, I definitely am more careful. Because I don't know the avalanche. I don't think there was avalanche danger right there, but there were rocks if you had slipped, and it would have been bad.
And you were told to turn around by a tour group, right? Group leader.
Yeah.
I think that tells it all. If they're experienced and they're telling you to go around, turn around.
Turn around.
Them.
Exactly.
I think the problem that I would have on a hike or walk is that I would always choose the route that's quickest because I want to get out of the way. Because I'm not great at walking or hiking, right? I get tired very easily, and I think, if it's an extra 2 kilometers, but it's 2 kilometers more, I'm like, I'd rather just get there quickly and get it done. So that's probably where I'd be a bit more risky and just, let's just do that way and go that way.
Yeah.
You also dipped onto another trail on this chapter, the GR55.
Yeah, GR55. Yeah.
What's that?
So at one point, the GR5 and the GR55 split, and the GR5 stays down low going from village to village. It's just not quite. And the GR55 is considered the high route. It goes over some higher passes. And even though I say I'm cautious, I do like a little, an adventure. And, I had read the guidebook and it didn't say it wasn't any more difficult. It was just higher elevation. So there was definitely more snow, but it was packed. The trail was packed down and people had been in front. We weren't the first ones crossing it that season. So we did the 55, and that was actually, I think we cut off a day and a half or something going that way. So you would have picked that way.
Yeah. Fair point.
Yeah. And, again, sometimes higher up, bigger views and things like that. So we definitely saw more. We saw some chamois, some goats, mountain goats up there too. So it's very pretty.
And you start to describe about you walking with Jim, you sort of like working together now, like you know each other's, I guess, strengths and weaknesses, how far you can go, the pace. I think you mentioned it because obviously when you have your friends come and do a bit, a short bit, they can like go straight off and they're really fast. You're like, hang on, we need to get into our groove. So you start to realize that walking with Jim is you just know where you are, each other. Sometimes you disagree, we all do, but on the whole, it's a good teamwork.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The last chapter, the Southern Alps, I haven't actually read it all yet, so I'm in for a treat. I assume you finish it. But you're actually there for the World Cup win when France won the World Cup in 2018. Yeah. They deserve to win that. They should have won it this year, really, I think. But what was that like, just being in a country in England? We fantasize about the time we would win the World Cup again. We haven't done it since the 60s. I think we can imagine what the country would be like. I think it's a boost. But what was it like to be in France when they won the World Cup?
Well, it was wonderful. And all along we had seen some different, some of the other matches, which was fun. It's just fun to be in a small bar when the home team is winning. So we saw a lot of winning games. And even in one mountain refuge, there wasn't a TV, but they were all huddled around a teeny little iPhone watching.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
classic.
we weren't watching at that point. But again, it was just fun to see the hope and the love of football.
Football.
And then when that night when they did win, we were actually pretty tired that night, and we were not in. Modane is not the prettiest. I don't know. We were just really tired. We ended up ordering pizza in, which we had sort of never done, and we watched it in our bedroom. And then we looked out the window, and you could see once they won, the whole town went wild. There were fireworks, and any kind of musical instrument that could be found was played, and people are driving the cars up and down and, honking. And it was so much fun and it was still light out. I think they won around, I don't remember the exact time, but you could see them all just having so much fun. And so, yeah, it was pretty special. Everybody was happy.
Yeah, and it happens once every 4 years, right? So if you win it, it's a big thing.
It really a very big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's in New Zealand at that point. Yeah, it's in Wellington, and there's like a small contingent of French people there, like tiny, and they also went to the same bar. So I think at 3 or 4 in the morning when it's pretty quiet, there on this night they're pretty loud. So yeah, that was quite interesting to see. What's also interesting in this chapter, which I've read so far, is that you describe the age of the hikers. And I put this in relation to my travels this year about the age of travelers. And it's weird. We're in like mid-30s. And you don't meet many people backpacking at our age, because if you think about it, probably got a career, kid, maybe some kids, mortgage as well. Like it's very rare to meet some people at our age that are just backpacking the same as us. And what we felt like, there was lots of people younger, 18, 19, 20, early 20s, or lots of older people who obviously maybe retired or got plenty of time. So what was your impression that I think you meant like some older than you, some a bit younger than you, but mostly older?
Especially up in some of the mountain refuges. Maybe the younger people are actually camping now, wild camping, now that I think about it, backpacking and carrying their tents and things like that. Because we did run into younger people camping. But in the mountain refuge, I had been reading this book, and he talked about coming into a mountain refuge and feeling like he was in an old folks' home. And I looked around and I'm like, everybody's got gray hair. And so, but what's so wonderful about that is that there's all these, people in their 60s and 70s still walking, and what a culture that is, and we felt sort of blessed to be part of it. So,
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me of a story that, again, Vietnam. I don't know if Vietnam keeps coming up today. We were staying in an island, and it's called Phu Quoc. It's in the south. And at the time, 2013, they just built the airport. So not many tourists there at all. But the only tourists we saw in our accommodation was an American couple in the 70s, just drinking some vodka and enjoying a holiday. I was like, oh, wow, like these people are going for it in Vietnam. We've only really met people our age at this point. We started to realize that there's this older crowd that go to these resorts and hang out. It's pretty cool.
Traveling. Yeah.
So I haven't finished the chapter, but I assume you finished the journey. What's your overriding feelings at the end?
Well, I talk a little bit about how coming down into Nice, where there's, all of a sudden thousands of people, it's high summer along the beach, and they're all vacationing, and nobody really cares that we just walked across the continent. We had nobody there cheering us on, so it's a little bit anticlimactical. But it was also super emotional too. We sort of dove into the Mediterranean, which was so warm and lovely. I just dove in with my clothes on. Jim dove in with his walking shorts, And, we were, it was but like being sort of like being baptized, and, we
Yeah.
definitely had finished our journey. And then we spent four days in Nice, and celebrating and just resting.
Resting, yeah.
And we were tired by the end. I will say both of our bodies were just worn out. We couldn't have gone any further. But and then it's so interesting to come home and everyone's like, so what did you learn? They kept saying, that was a trip of a lifetime. And it really was a trip of a lifetime. And obviously I couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's why I ended up writing a book about it, which I didn't know I was going to write.
Okay.
I did not know that. I had kept a journal, basically a paragraph every day I wrote, so not long. And Jim had done about the same, and he shared his journal with me, and that's how I ended up deciding to write. I just couldn't get it out of my mind. And I had never heard of any of the GRs before, and I just felt like it was really important for people who love to walk but don't want to camp, is go to Europe and walk, basically.
Yeah, like the Camino is famous for having all those little albergues, they're called, along the trail, where it is every village. Yes. So you can stop anytime and don't worry, there's going to be somewhere to stay. Especially if you do one of the less known trails, there'll be space in there.
Yeah,
and I think in Europe it's just built for that. Yeah, you can just take your time, stay anywhere. Mm-hmm. If you want to go further, you can. If not, there's no pressure there. I don't know what it's like compared to where you are in Vermont or USA, but if you're doing a walking trail and you want to stop, I guess you've got to put a tent up and sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's very different.
Very different.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what I loved about Spain. I loved it. Was there a feeling of like missing something? Because obviously you've been walking pretty much every day for a long while. There's a goal attached to that. You're trying to get to the end. Was there like a sense of loss, maybe, or a purpose at the end, or were you just so relieved to finish, so tired that you're ready for the next thing?
No, I definitely, when I got home, I wanted to keep walking. Not every day, obviously not every day, but I went off and did hikes, and ended up doing a lot of hikes by myself, just we're pretty close to the long trail, but again, just day hikes. And I wanted to keep my fitness up since I worked so hard on it. And I did miss the walking, so I did enjoy it. And then I found over the next 3 years, basically, I did a lot of walking to help me to do the writing when I was doing the writing, because once I started walking, you just remember, it brings up that pace of step, 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 helps you remember everything that was going on, and the breathing and what it felt like to climb and things like that. So if I got stuck in the writing, I'd go off for a walk and take notes on my iPhone as I was walking to just jog my memory.
Oh, that's good, because walking does help with that, I think.
Yeah.
With anything, not just writing, but a lot of ideas come into your head when you walk.
Yeah.
I do use it as a tool. Oh, that's awesome. We actually didn't talk about your title of the book. Like that was coined by someone you met on the trail, right?
Yes. Yeah. To walk it is to see it. Basically, to walk a country is to see a country.
I can't disagree. That it definitely is.
Yeah.
The only thing that stops people is the time, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we had bundles of time, I would definitely go and walk. I've been saying to my partner, like, I want to do like a big 6-month walking trip somewhere. But that requires a heck of a lot of planning and money and all that sort of stuff, right? But that is on my mind. Like, in the future, I just want to see what it's like just to walk through all these unknown places that you never heard of.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool way to see it. And I think you're right. It is definitely the best way to see it.
Yeah.
So to wrap up the book, maybe you can just finish a few sentences as to why someone should go and walk the GR5. Like what is the one thing you say that people should definitely try out?
Well, I again, it's just such an amazing way to see a country by walking it. You notice as you go through a little village, you see the people splitting the wood, and harvesting the wood for their furnaces, their wood stoves. You see people sweep. I don't know. It's just such a great way to see a country. And I also think when you have a backpack on your back, people, as you come into the village, people have respect for you even before you've opened your mouth and started, tried to speak French. They have respect for you that you're not, you didn't just show up on the bus and you're leaving in an hour. And the French culture of walking and the European culture of walking, again, you're welcomed. So and I do think if you don't want to go do 3 months of walking, you could go do the Vosges, which 2 weeks. You could do the Jura for 2 weeks. You could do. So I actually, one of these days, I want to go back and walk part of the Holland and Belgium that we biked. I want to go back and do the walking part, which would be 3 weeks of walking. And I might just go do that on my own. Jim doesn't want to do that. So I'll either bring a friend or go do it by myself. So,
Absolutely. We met loads of people doing the Camino on their own.
Yeah.
And also for people trying to understand, like we were a group of early-ish 30-year-olds doing it. But in our dorm room, there was a couple that were in their 60s, a couple from, I think, somewhere sort of Middle East who are like in their 40s. Like, it is a full array of different types of people, and there's like a collective agreement that you don't even need to speak about. Like you are just doing a walking trip, and you're tired. There's no partying. It's just like tell your story. Where did you go today? Have your dinner. Meet some new people, and everyone's in bed pretty early. Because it's a walking trip, isn't it? It's a great vibe. I quite like it.
Yeah. And I guess I would also say, when you're walking, it's kind of like a meditation. So there's also been all these studies about how good walking is for you, for long life, longevity and things like that. So it clears your head. It's good for your body. I mean, there's like no negatives. Basically.
No, there's no. Yeah, absolutely.
None.
No. And like, people know the Camino is a bit of a religious thing, but you don't have to be religious either to do that. You can just walk it. That's not a problem. But the GR routes, I'm going to research more and see what ones I like. I don't know too much about them, despite being from Europe. I'm from Norwich, which is only like 30 minutes from Holland, right, on a flight. So don't know much about them. But for people to learn more about GR5 and your journey, where can people buy your book?
Anywhere books are sold. It's now on audiobook and ebook, wherever you buy books. And I know it's available in the UK and France. I'm not sure that I know in Germany you could get the ebook. You might not be able to get the hard, but anywhere you buy books.
Did you do the audio for your book?
I did do the audio for my book.
How was that experience?
Interesting. So very interesting. So being able to, I can speak English perfectly fine, and I did all the English, but I'd forgotten how many French sentences I had put in there.
Yes, there's not French in there. There is.
That was difficult, and the woman, the audio engineer, she was so patient with me. Let's do that again. She could speak French. I'm like, why don't you just do it? And she's like, no, we can't have that. So there were a few. I ended up putting not a disclaimer, but an author's note at the very beginning saying, I mean no disrespect to the French language, but I've done my best. Please have compassion for me. And there were also a few places where I said it in English and she said in French. Because it was so, that's
what I would do.
But I think it came out well.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So people can listen to that.
Yeah.
And what about like any websites or social medias that people can find you on?
My website is Kathy Elkind, Elkind, and it's Kathy with a K.com. And if you're looking for pictures of the GR5, you can see them, scroll down and you'll see, I have photos from the GR5 on there too. And so that's my website. I also, Instagram's probably the best place to find me. And my YouTube channel, there are some videos too. And since then, Jim and I have done a couple of more walks. We've walked in southern Spain, not the Caminos, but southern Spain.
Oh yeah, nice.
The Andalusia coast to coast.
Oh,
that
dream.
was a 3-week walk. And then last year we went off and hiked east of Rome in the Apennines for 2 weeks, and then in Puglia for 2 weeks. So we've done some other walks.
That's great. I'll put the links in the show notes so people can click and have a look.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
Oh, the Andalusia walk. Oh, it's got me thinking. That's the southern part of Spain. I really want to check it out. I've not been.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, amazing. Okay, we're just going to finish the episode. I have a little feature at the end.
Okay.
It's called Quickfire Travel Questions. These are some of your favourite things that you've seen. Could be not just the GR5, could be anywhere in the world. I'm going to start with...
It's travel question time.
How many states have you travelled to?
I think I've traveled to all of them. I need to, except for this. Well, I haven't done Hawaii. I have done Alaska, except for the southern. And I want to go down and spend some time. I haven't never been to Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. So I've crisscrossed the country many times, but I haven't gone down there. And that's on my to-do list, or not to-do, my bucket list.
Bucket list, okay. And which 3 states would you say are your favorites?
Ooh, that's really hard. I lived in Oregon I lived in Bend, Oregon after college for 5 years, and 4 years. I loved Bend, Oregon. So Oregon, Vermont, and actually I love Massachusetts, the beaches in Massachusetts, and that's my home too. It's where I grew up and raised my kids too. So
yeah, we stayed.
I know a lot of people wouldn't say Massachusetts, but I
think we loved it. We stayed in Salem on Winter Island campground, which is like right on the edge of the headland. And it's got amazing views over the water and some of these amazing houses across the water. Yeah, pretty idyllic.
The coast, beautiful. Yeah,
nice little beach as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about 3 countries that you travelled to worldwide that are maybe your favourites?
Well, I guess I'd have to say France. France, and I'd say back to Vietnam. I don't know. Switzerland too is just spectacular.
Just expensive.
There's so many very expensive. Yeah. And we're heading to South America, so Chile and Argentina coming up. So I have a feeling those will.
Wow, good time of year to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my next question was going to be 3 countries next on your hit list. So I guess you just named 2.
Yes.
Chile and Argentina. What would be a third one if you had a choice?
Another. Lithuania. Some of those Eastern.
Baltics.
Yeah, Baltics. Yeah. And Norway someday. There's a lot more that I still haven't done, but I also. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about 3 international cuisines that are your favorites?
Indian food, definitely. I love Indian food. Vietnamese food, or any sort of Asian food. It's just so fresh and yummy. And Italian.
Classic answer. Yeah, people love that. What about a favorite mountain?
Favorite mountain. Am I going to say Stark Mountain, Mad River, right where I ski? Mad River Glen is one of my favorite mountains. Mount Etna. I've never been on it, but we were in Sicily looking at it. I think it's interesting to go around mountains, but never actually go on them. And then Stromboli too. The volcano off of Sicily.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's on my list. Okay. What about, this is an interesting question, a favourite walk, hike or trail? I do normally ask it. It's a bit weird that we just talked the whole episode about it.
Well, definitely.
But maybe one other than GR5, like maybe another one that you like.
Well, definitely was GR5. But there's one that I want to do. It's called The Way, but it's whatever the way is in Germany. It starts in Munich and goes through the German Alps, the Austrian Alps, and then the Dolomites, and goes down to Vienna. So it's Munich to Vienna, and I think it's about 30 days of walking. That's on my list too.
Wow.
So
Okay. What about a favorite beach?
Favorite beach. Oh, I know. At the end of the Andalusia, so it's coast to coast. It starts in the Mediterranean and ends in the Atlantic. And after Tarifa, there's Bologna. It's a town of 300 people, and there used to be a Roman city there. So there's all these Roman Roman ruins, but the beaches, white sandy beaches, and there was we were there in, was that late November, and there was nobody there, and the water was not warm, but you could jump in and swim, and spectacular.
Dreamy,
yes.
Okay, if you could pick one city in the world to drink a coffee and watch the world go by, where are you going to sit?
City. I mean, Nice, but not during high summer, I guess.
Okay, yeah, fair.
Yeah. Or Barcelona. I don't know. It's hard to say, just one.
Okay. If you could live in another country for a year and you're not lived there before, where are you going to live?
I'm trying to think of something different. I would love to go live in Sicily. Cefalù in
specific,
Sicily. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. A few more questions to end. Let's do, if you could only have one view for the rest of the time. So an example could be a beach, could be an island, could be a mountain, could be the plains of Africa, whatever. What view are you going to have?
I have a beautiful view of the mountains right here, but I still love the ocean. It's something that's difficult for me to answer. How about mountains with an ocean?
Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I am, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last question is, same question for everyone on the podcast. If someone's listening right now and they're a bit nervous, or they are just a bit anxious about going to travel, could be anywhere, not necessarily a walking trip, just anywhere in the world, any words of wisdom of why they should take the leap, take the risk, and go and experience a different culture in a different place in the world?
Because, and I'm not just talking about physical, you're like stronger than you think. You are more confident than you think. It's our limiting beliefs that cause our anxiety or cause our fear of the unknown, and just welcoming, learning. It's a practice, learning to welcome that unknown and being comfortable in the unknown, so that it's okay to have some fears, but let's just hang out in that a little bit of fear, but there's so much to learn. Like, why waste your life living in fear, and keep pushing your own limit. You've made your limits. You can break through them. Yeah, that's what I would say.
That's awesome. So Kathy, thanks for coming onto the podcast. It's been a great chat. I've learned a lot. I love the book. I'm going to finish it today, so read the last chapter, and I really appreciate you making time.
Thank you. It's been fun to chat with you. Thanks.
Thank
James.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to my Winging It Travel podcast episode today. You can find me on Instagram at James Hammond Travel or Winging It Travel Podcast. You can search for both. I release weekly clips of this podcast episode, as well as photos from the last 8 to 10 years of my travels. You can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook and Pinterest by searching Winging It Travel Podcast. I do release daily content to do with travel and the podcast throughout the week. Also check out my website, jameshammond.org. There's content about myself, my travels, and there's also a newsletter sign up as well as a contact form. Finally, please rate and review the podcast on Podchaser. This is my platform of choice. Alternatively, you can rate this on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. This really helps the podcast gain a bit of traction for the future in terms of guests and content. And I'm glad to see that you guys are listening out there, reviewing it and enjoying the content so far. Stay safe, stay humble, keep listening, keep traveling, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers, James.